Welcome to the Straight Outta BS podcast. I'm your host, Jordan, as usual. I wanted to continue to thank you guys for sharing the videos, liking them, commenting, buying merch from the merch store, signing up for Patreon. I want to personally shout out Janine Miller. You are awesome. You are my one and only Patreon member, but I really appreciate you more than you know. Everything goes back towards the podcast, so I really just appreciate that. And to anybody that bought merch, I saw that like 2 or 3 people bought a t-shirt. Thank you guys so much for that. Really appreciate that. Like I said, I'm a one-man team, so everything helps and everything's reimbursed back into the podcast. So for anybody who wants to donate, the links are going to be in the description as usual. And with that being said, I want to do a moment of silence for the person still suffering with addictions, intrusive thoughts, anything like that. So on the count of 3, I'm going to do a moment of silence. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. Go ahead and introduce yourself and where you went.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Young, and I attended 5 different boarding schools for 6 years. I attended my first boarding school for girls was Charity Haven Girls Home in Milton, Florida. And then I went to their sister facility that had moved locations from Texas to North Carolina, and it was called Victory Acres Girls Academy. And it was ran by the same man and woman that ran Charity Haven. So his wife, Norma, walked in, ran the one in Florida, and then he ran the one in Texas that moved to North Carolina, eventually got shut down. I also attended Bethel Girls and Boys Academy in Mississippi twice, got kicked out, and ran away twice. Was the first girl to run away. And I also attended the famous Rebekah Home for Girls in Corpus Christi, Texas, that was shut down, reopened as New Beginnings Girls Academy in Pace, Florida. And I also attended Reclamation Ranch Academy. So yeah, lots of places.
Okay. This is going to be interesting then.
Yes.
What age first of all, were they back to back? Like, did you get sent to one program and then get sent to another one after that? Or
yeah, it was back to back. So I pretty much got kicked out of my programs. I did what I could to get kicked out. I was ungovernable. You couldn't tell me shit. So I was first sent away when I was 11 years old. So to give you a little bit of a backstory, I'm adopted, and my adoptive mother was extremely abusive. And when I mean extremely abusive, think of the movie Mommy Dearest meets a boy called It. She would torture us, and it was so bad to the point where my older siblings tried to kill her. They injected bleach in her insulin trying to kill her. It was that bad. We would sleep in bathtubs, her personal bathtub in her bedroom. She would wake us up spraying cold water on us. She waterboarded me when I was 9 years old on the kitchen table with a 2-liter bottle of ginger ale because I drank a glass of it without her permission. She was just real sick and sadistic with her punishments. So I lived with that for about 11 and a half years. She suffered for a very long time. She was sick. She had heart complications. She had diabetes. She had several strokes. I mean, she suffered. But I was 11 years old. I got sent away to Charity Haven by my aunt. She had gotten custody of me when my adopted mother got ill, and she decided to send me to the same girls' home that she had sent my sister Beverly away to. And Beverly actually was running away from home, doing drugs, getting involved with gangs, stealing, that kind of stuff. And she had been in the programs to herself when she was 15. So they sent her away to Milton, Florida's Charity Haven. And then when Charity Haven decided to take me too, they separated us because they don't like siblings together. You know, they like to keep the siblings separated. And so they put her in the program that was in Texas. I only got to see her once and hug her once because they would have us meet up and we would go to different revivals and sing and quote scriptures and that kind of stuff at these churches. And so they sent Beverly away. I get sent to Trudy Haven. I was there about 3 months, and my entire time there, like after the first 2 weeks there, they put me in what's called the prayer room, which is an isolation room. It had wall-to-wall carpeting, even on the floor. There's a like a church bench that was screwed into the wall, and they would play preaching tapes and singing tapes, and I would eat my meals in there. I would only come out to go to the restroom when I was allowed. Um, I was only allowed to wear a red shirt to show that I was on punishment. I could only wash my hair and my body with a bar of Dial soap. They would give me like a little flimsy comb.
Unscented, probably.
Yeah, the gold, the original. Yeah, a comb like this to brush out my hair. Now you can see my hair is pretty big. I have
Yeah.
natural curly thick hair.
Yeah.
And so imagine no conditioner and your hair is all matted from washing it with bar soap. I couldn't even brush my hair out.
Yeah.
I just remember I was in the prayer room for like 3 months. I remember trying to commit suicide. They had a closet in the room, and it had this retractable pole, and I didn't know it was retractable. So when I tore my t-shirt and tied it around there and put it on my neck, it wasn't long enough, and plus it was retractable. So they heard the clunk clunk, and I fell down. They came in there, instead of trying to help a child in crisis, like, why are you trying to kill yourself, what's going on, it was like, you demon. And they had a Bible, and they were praying over me and singing, and it was horrible. And then I just remember them coming to get me out. I wasn't allowed to have no shoes or remove my shoes, and they shackled me. And I'm like, why am I being shackled? And they put me in a van. Now, granted, I had never ran away from home before. The most I had ever did was one time my mom beat me with a switch one time, and I ran away to the backyard. We had a ditch, and I just would sit in the ditch when I was upset to calm myself down. Like, that's the furthest thing I had done from running away. So I wasn't going to run. They still had me shackled. We drove for an extremely long time and go down this red dirt clay road, and I see these brick barracks and these boys marching in cadence, and they're wearing camouflage pants and white t-shirts, and they're yelling, and I'm like, oh, okay, they're just gonna send me here to try to scare me, like, okay, whatever. So I'm 11. I'm not even 5'2" at the time, so I'm probably like 4'11", 5 foot, about 80 pounds, 85 pounds soaking wet. I'm pretty tiny. I get out the van, and I'm met with this black man and this other man, and they're screaming in my face saying, oh, you think you're tough, huh? Screaming, thinking I'm going to cry, but I'm not crying because I'm used to being yelled at and talked down to and screamed at and called names. I mean, my first bully was my adopted mother. She would call me in the N word and call me a little N baby and say, I'm going to trade you for a white child. Like, I grew up my entire life, so it wasn't really affecting me. So, yeah, so they took me inside to Herman Fountain Senior's house, the owner and founder of Bethel Baptist Boys and Girls Academy. And they took me inside, and they started making me do exercises and bends and thrusts. And of course, I'm being dramatic with it, flaring my arms like, okay, I could do this all day. Is this all you got? I wound up being in that program for a year, and actually wound up going home. I had no indentation that I was going to go home. I hadn't really received letters. I just remember one day being told to go to Herman Fountain's house. And then he said, you got 10 minutes. Your dad's on your way to pick. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm going home for Christmas. And I went home. I remember that night that my adopted father picked me up. I didn't even recognize him because he had gained so much weight. So much weight. He looked like I recognized the neighbor who came with him before I recognized my adopted father. And I remember that night in the hotel, we stayed in a Red Roof Inn, and I stayed up all night long looking out the window because I thought that they were going to come get me and take me back to Bethel. I was so scared. And then I went home, and my sister was home. And so she had just left the programs because the program she was in, she ran away from. The cops picked her up. And when the cops called the girls home to come pick her up, the staff, one of the cops overheard the staff member, Bill McNamara, tell Beverly, we're going to beat you when we get back to the facility. So the cops sent a investigator to go check out Beverly and the other girls that had ran with her. And she asked my sister, do you have any bruises? And she's like, I don't know. And so they took her and examined her, and she was black and blue from her bottom to the end of her thigh. So they called our Aunt Sherry, told them, hey, there's abuse going on, you come get her. So after that, I'm assuming what happened was after my dad heard what went on there, he was like, no, I'm going to go get my baby. Because it wasn't my aunt that picked me up, it was my dad.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then to give a little bit more context, my dad wasn't an abusive man. I loved him very much. He just was a very weak man, and he was abused just as well by his wife. I remember there were times that he would stand in the middle between me and her, and he would take the hits for me. And she would call him all kinds of disgusting, nasty names, and she's just cruel and evil. And it mentally messed him up to the point where I remember when I was 8 years old, him trying to jump off the St. Matthew's Bridge in Jacksonville, Florida. Actually, St. John's Bridge in Jacksonville, Florida. He tried to commit suicide like 3 times because of everything that was going on. So, anyways, I go back home. I'm maybe home 3 months. Yeah, like 3 months, because I get home in December and my adoptive mother dies in March. So it was like 2.5 weeks after my 13th birthday. I remember coming home the week after she died from school, and my aunt had all my stuff packed and was sending me back to Bethel. And let me tell you how much she knew about Bethel, how little. She had packed regular clothing, like regular clothes, like skirts and shirts and regular clothing. We wore uniforms. We didn't wear regular clothing. So if you had known anything about this program you were sending me back to, you would know we wore uniforms. At this time, my sister had got turned 18 and she got married to get out of the house, and we shared a bedroom. And she left a lot of her things behind. And while my aunt was packing my belongings while I was at school, she found bikinis and stuff. They weren't even mine. I mean, it's April. It's in Jacksonville, and I know Florida's hot, but not in April. It's still like really bad,
Yeah.
rainy, cold weather. Um, and she was like, oh, this is your bikini. Now, how did I acquire a bikini in 3 months of being home at 12 years old? Like, are you kidding me? Like, the logic isn't even there. Like, she just assumed I was like my sister and I was nothing like Beverly at all. And sent me back to Bethel. I went back to Bethel. And this time I was smart about it. So the first time I went to Bethel, there was a girl there who used me as her human punching bag and would beat the living crap out of me just for no reason. And so I ran away. And then this time I was like, well, I'm going to be smart. And the girl was still at Bethel. Well, she had left, came back. And I decided to befriend this girl. I said, I'm not getting my ass beat this time. This time I'm going to be the ass kicker. Like, I'm not going to let nobody beat me up. And I worked every level up to get to what's called night watch. Now, night watch is when they let trusted girls stay up, or trusted boys stay up all night long, and you would make sure no one ran away. And so I worked the program up to get out of orientation room and work the levels so I can get on night watch so I could run. And I don't remember whose idea it really was, but me and 2 other girls that night, we ran. And I was 13 years old, and the other girls were 15 and 16, and we walked from Petal, Mississippi, which is right outside of Hattiesburg, and we walked all the way to Hattiesburg. And I remember us being so tired, and we stopped at this laundromat, and I remember falling asleep, and when I woke up, they were gone. They left me. And I didn't know what to do, so I called Bethel to pick me back up. I did. Mia Green, I was 13. I didn't know what to do. So I went back to Bethel, was on punishment. CPS came because they found the other girls, and nothing was done. No really real big investigation. I was put on punishment. I had to stand in a corner for, weeks. And I remember Miss Doty, the staff member, saying, Sabrina, come get in the van with us. We're going to go pick up supplies from Loosedale, which was where the boys' barracks were. So I'm thinking, okay, why are they having me pick some? And they just kept looking back at me the whole time. I was like, something's up. Something's up. We get there to Loosedale, on the property of Loosedale, and we get to Herman Fountain Senior's house, and there's Dave Walkden from Victory Acres. So you see the pattern here. They just like to swap the kids they no longer want, right? So my parents weren't one of those that paid consistently. So they weren't making a lot of profit off of me. So they're not going to sit there and deal with my shenanigans and not make any money, right?
Especially
So
if
they
you're
just,
acting. Shit, yeah.
Yeah, so they just passed me off to back to Dave Walkton. Well, he was reopening the program that got shut down in Texas and North Carolina. That program got shut down too. CPS came. Well, when my aunt came to pick me up from that one, the same one that she picked Beverly up from, but it was in Texas, do you think she took me home? No, she drove me back to Milton, Florida, to the first program I was at, Charity Haven. Except for there's no girls there. I'm the only girl there. Wouldn't that be a red flag for you as a parent or a guardian? Like, red flag. This program's been shut down so many times, yet I'm still going to keep this child here because I don't want them. Right.
Yeah.
And then my sister shows up, and she's well into adulthood now. And she was fleeing from an abusive relationship. And instead of taking me out of the program and going to the police or CPS or anything, mind you, regardless of who had custody of me, she could have fought for me. She didn't. And she let Bill McNamara, who at the time quit working for the Walktons and decided to run the Rebekah Home for Girls that was shut down in Texas and was reopening in Pace, Florida. So he came and picked me up in the middle of the night, woke me up. I woken up to a bunch of girls singing by my bed. And he's like, got handcuffs and shackles. And he's like, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. And I'm like, I'll take easy for 500, Alex, because I already know how this is going to go. And my sister's sitting there at the bed, like watching all this. And I'm like, looking at her like at 14, that this time, like, why aren't you doing anything? And so she was like, well, there's nothing I can do, Susie. And I wound up going to this program. And at this time, the program in Texas had just closed down and they hadn't finished the facility yet that was being redone and remodeled and stuff in Florida. So we were staying on a property in Devil's Elbow, Missouri, called Thanks to Calvary Boys Academy. And so we stayed there for a little bit until our dorm was done. And then we moved down to Pace, Florida. And I was there for a year. And while I was there, that was probably worse than Bethel. And Bethel was pretty bad. I mean, they had us black girls picking cotton for no freaking reason, not for punishment, just because they could.
Yeah,
And
probably degrading too. Probably trying to degrade you too.
yeah, it was just to degrade us. And I remember telling Bubba, like, this is the most racist thing I've ever experienced. I'm not picking this cotton. I'm not your effing, N-word. And he was like, do you know what we do to your kind down south? And I was like, well, I'm gonna pick this fucking cotton. You ain't hanging my ass. And I remember my friend Alexis actually recalls me being out there picking cotton for 12 hours straight in the hot Mississippi heat. 12 hours straight. They had me digging up tree stumps with a spoon. And when I mean a spoon, I mean like a spoon you would eat cereal with. And I never got the tree stump out. So I was out there for a very long time. Just sick, crazy, sadistic punishments that was just to degrade you because they could. And well, while I was at Rebekah home, I lost my shower privileges, which I didn't shower for almost 3 months. It was really bad. And they shined a flashlight in my eye, tried to exorcise my demons, poured Dawn dish soap down my throat. I vomited. It was just repetitive, abuse. And I remember being told to go with them and to this trailer that was on the property, and I did. And there was a lady standing there from CPS, and she asked me, well, have they ever abused you? And I know most people would be like, I would have told them everything. Well, my abusers were standing right there. I was scared. So I was like, no. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, they're not going to believe me anyways, because they condition you. No one's going to believe you, blah, blah, blah. So she asked me if I had anywhere else to go, and I told her kind of what was going on with my family. And I suggested myself to another program that I thought and it was the lesser of the evils, but there was still abuse that happened. And that one, I was really groomed and brainwashed into thinking that the program saved my life and that it helped me. Granted, I was 11 when I was sent away to these programs. And I know that there's some crazy stories about some crazy 11-year-olds, but that was not me. I've even had former staff reach out to me since I've been sharing my story publicly. And they're like, we remember you as very happy and, witty, and, you weren't this, kid that really needed to be in the program, a lot of us kind of looked at you, kind of felt sorry for you because, you didn't need to be in there with 16, 17-year-olds. I mean, we had literal gang members there, so I quickly turned into a bully that messed with bullies in the program because I was so sick of it. And I remember the staff wanting me to become a leader. And I was like, no, I'm not being no snitch. I'm not, you're not going to force me to hurt somebody else. I'm not doing that. If I'm going to hurt somebody, it's because they pissed me off, and so I was at the ranch for a year, and we went to go to this church called Gateway Baptist Church in Eaton, Ohio. And we sang and gave our scripted testimonies, the whole 9 yards. And we stayed with this family after church, and I got along with their daughter. She had developmental disabilities, and I played with her, and we wrote letters to each other. And one day that family asked me to come live with them. And to my surprise, I was allowed to. So I lived with them. That didn't really work out well. Granted, they had no trauma-informed care. They had no knowledge of what my life was prior to the programs. They just thought, oh, she was a troubled teen, so they assumed things about me. And we just argued, and it just didn't work out. So I wound up going back to the ranch, and then again, they wanted me to stay as staff, and I was about to turn 18, and I said, no, I'm not staying here. I want to leave. Before I left, I pretty much told them, because they told me, well, you're not an adult in Alabama till you're 19. We can keep you here till you're 19. I said, the fuck you are. I said, the next time we go to a different church in a different state, guess what I'm doing? I'm running. And there's nothing you can do about it because I'll be 18. And when we go to give our testimonies, I'm going to tell them the real truth about this program. So they made a deal with me and said, when you graduate high school, because we did the AC PACE curriculum, so you can go as fast or as slow as you needed to, they were like, you can leave. So I would stay up till 2:30 in the morning to get my PACE work done. And my diploma says December of 2004 on it. And I didn't have a graduation ceremony. They took me to like Walmart to get pictures done with a cap and gown and a piece of paper. And they mailed me my diploma and gave me $40. Well, before I left, I had several girls write letters to their families, boyfriends, whoever they wanted to write a letter to and tell them the things that they couldn't, because all these letters and our phone calls were always censored, and I mailed them out. And then a few years later, that program got raided by the FBI and got shut down. So I pretty much moved back to Eaton, Ohio. I got out of the programs and moved back to Jacksonville. And because I hadn't lived in Jacksonville for so long, I didn't know how to adapt it to a huge city. I was scared. I was so naive. I was not prepared for the real world. I didn't know how to think for myself. I had no critical thinking skills. And so I was left up to my own devices or to trust whoever I asked for help. And I wound up moving back to Eaton, Ohio shortly after. And met this guy. Well, I had met him prior to going back to the ranch, but I was never allowed to date him. And we wound up dating, and I found myself pregnant at 18 years old. And I decided to keep my baby. My baby is about to be 18 years old. You'll see. Are you going to prom?
Yep.
You'll see. You'll meet my baby at prom. She'll be at prom. She'll be with me. She's almost 18 years old, and she'll be turning 18. And I wound up marrying her father, and we've been together for 18 years, and we have two beautiful children together. And I just kind of got to this point where I needed to share my story. I always wanted to be an author. I always wanted to be a writer. I would always get in trouble for writing short stories and passing it out as contraband in the programs with notebook paper. But it was almost like I had this block, like I can't write any stories until mine's done. And then it just so happened that, I was finding other survivors that had been to the programs with me. And we started like a little group chat discussion, started talking about the programs, and then more survivors started sharing their stories. So Alan Knoll, he was a Bethel boy, was at the program same time as me, 11 years old, wrote a story about Bethel. He also went to Agape boarding school. And
No.
he's actually gone to legislation in Missouri to help get some laws changed and some bills passed. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do it. And at this time, it was the perfect timing. I had done an ancestry DNA test and found my biological mother, found my biological father, found my siblings, aunts, cousins, grandparents. And so it just kind of came together at this perfect timing of when everyone was starting to go publicly with being a survivor of the troubled teen industry. And so I titled it Dear Renisha, Turning Trauma into Triumph. Before I was adopted, my name was Renisha. That was my biological name. And my biological mother had named me after my older sister who had passed away when she was 7 years old. And so she named me after her. And then obviously when I got adopted, my name got changed. So the book is wrote in a journal format, as if I'm writing to my sister. So that's why it's titled that. And it was just easier to write it in journal form. There's 24 chapters with a few extra chapters that highlight some Senate bills. And then I actually came up with a Bill of Rights that I would like to see adapted. There's foster kids that have Bill of Rights, but not in the troubled teen industry. And that's something that needs to be done. And I also listed some examples of things that can be done to help safeguard these children and implement some more of a structure to where it's easy for the state to track these programs by setting a limit on how many facilities could be in each state. I understand the need for somewhere for these parents to send their children, but at the same time, it's not being done right. So it needs to be completely dismantled and rebuilt. And we need to approach it from a healthcare standpoint where the insurance will pay for it. But it's mental health. So for example, I mean, when you cut your finger, you don't just pray that the bleeding stops. You put a Band-Aid on it, right? When you're hurting, you take Tylenol for your headache. It's no different from mental health. And there's a mental health crisis here in America all over. And when it comes to children having mental health issues, it's like, oh, well, you're a kid. Your life can't be that hard. When 99% of the time, it's from the family dynamics that are overlooked and what's going on in the home. And there's some bigger issues there. I know for me, a lot of my trauma stemmed before the program within my family because I was being abused by my adoptive mother. And, you know, it was gone on for so long and overlooked. And I had family members who were looking the other way or like, well, we knew it was bad, but we didn't know it was that bad. Well, I'm sorry. How bad does it need to be for you to report until I'm dead? Like, because I almost died 3 times, you know? And then, you know, I'll get all the time, well, you turned out great for what you went through, but I shouldn't have had to go through that to turn out great. I shouldn't have had to endure that to turn out great. Just can only think of how great of a person I'd be had I not gone through that. That's what I think of. Had I not gone through that, I'd probably be a much kinder, nicer person. Now I'm on the defense of becoming friends with anybody. I don't just trust people. I won't set foot in a church unless it's a funeral or a wedding. Like I just don't attend church. I'm scared of it because I've been indoctrinated. I mean, I remember having a preacher sit there and spit in my face and yell at me and pretty much call me an abomination because I'm biracial and I'm paying for the sins of my parents for mixing races is what he told me. I had one preacher tell me I wasn't allowed to marry a white man, that I needed to marry whatever the race my father was because he assumed I was the mixed stereotype product of a white mother, black father. My dad was white. My mom was the black one. I married whoever the fuck I wanted, you know? So it was just those things of the mind controlled and the brainwashing and not being able to make simple decisions for myself that I really had to overcome that. And so I did 2 years of EMDR therapy, and did some self-help work, and came out with my book. And then I started advocating for reform in the troubled teen industry. I actually helped co-host a podcast with Jeremy Bigner on a Man Apart podcast. I've done, this is probably like my 5th podcast that I've done. I've done a mini series with some other ladies who attended the Rebekah Home for Girls on Surviving Abuse podcast. And so I just kind of try to help get other survivors feel comfortable with sharing their stories, because it's really hard. And then I have survivors in my DMs every day like, oh my gosh, how are you able to do that? I still haven't even told my mom. I don't want my mom to feel bad. I'm like, before you even go public, you talk to your loved ones and you tell them, you know what I mean? I mean, I would hate, as a parent that sent my child away, that's how I heard first that my kid went through that. I would hate that my child didn't feel comfortable enough to come talk to me, or tell me. And parents, a lot of kids are, well, they're not kids now, but people who have gone through this, they don't want their parents to feel bad. And I want them to help try to kind of get over that, you know what I mean? Because it's not about them, it's about you and your healing. And so I just tell people, do it at your own pace. Just because I'm out publicly and writing a book doesn't mean that you have to, but if you want to, I'm going to help you. So I just kind of do more of like survivor support things. And I like doing the podcast, and I don't just cover T.T.I stuff. I do true crime too. I also list in the back of my book all the kids that have passed away from being in the troubled teen industry all the way up to Taylor Goodrich, which is about 2022. I also provide several links in my book to different websites, such as Unsilence, We Warn Them, Troubled Teen Advocacy Group. So people can research this after they're done reading it, because it doesn't just stop when you're done reading. This is still going on today. And I don't think people understand how huge this industry is. I knew about the different girls' homes I was in because it was ran by the same 4 to 6 families. But I had no idea about Provo Canyon and Agape. And, I knew about Tranquility Bay because Bethel, they would threaten to send us there. But I had no idea how huge this industry is. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry where 120,000 children a year are sent away to. And for the stupidest stuff, too. I hear stories from survivors all over, and they'll tell me their story. And like one girl said, I smoked pot one time, told my mom. Granted, she had 2 jobs, made straight A's, and was paying her mom rent to live in the house. Was helping her mom with the bills. And she accidentally drove herself to Bethel. And I'm like, oh my gosh. You know what I mean? Like, and she even told her mom, like, hey, I tried pot and I didn't like it. You know how I would do as a mom? Well, I'm glad that you came and you talked to me about that. And this is the importance on why I don't want you doing those kinds of things, because your brain's not fully developed till age 25. Let's educate you on this. I'm glad you came and you talked to me. That's how I would handle that. Not just, oh, I'm going to send you to military school in Mississippi because you tried pot once. She was a straight A student with 2 jobs. you know it's just some of the stories I hear. I'm like, oh my gosh, like they didn't even, most of these people that I talked to didn't even need to be there. And that's the sad thing. It's just like their parents got tired of it. I can't tell you how many products of divorced parents, the children, it's the step parent didn't want them, and so the parent put them in the troubled teen industry. It just breaks my heart.
Yeah.
And this is still going on. That's why there needs to be regulation. I believe fully that before you're one, it should be eradicated on sending your child out of state. You need to seek in treatment help or help for your child in the state in which you live in before you're even allowed to send them away, okay, outside of the state. I believe that you should have to be evaluated by a qualified professional on why you need some sort of in treatment housing. You know, just because your stepdaddy don't like you and don't want you or want the responsibility of kids shouldn't make it to where you end up in the troubled teen industry because you're unwanted. And that's a lot of what's happening here is unwanted, or the parents being told, oh, my kid's ADHD and rowdy or depressed and suicidal or blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, send him away, send him away, send him away. It's so sad.
Okay, so you were in schools from the time you were 11 till the time you were 18 then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't have any sort of teenage experience. Okay.
At all.
Okay. um, you pretty
Well,
much
like
covered.
maybe 3 months, maybe about 3 months when I lived with the Comleys, about 3 months
Okay.
of a normal experience, somewhat. And that was just a religious normal experience. Not even, I didn't go to public school. I was homeschooled in a Christian church school by some lady in her basement with 15 other kids. Yeah.
The your story growing up sounds very familiar to. I've heard a couple stories of the House of Horror true crime things. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it reminded me of.
Yeah.
You saying that. So I know a lot of people. Well, not a lot of people, but I know a couple people have had very similar upbringings that you did. So I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Thank you.
Seem to be very strong now and level-headed, so that's cool. That's good. Is there any excerpts from the book that you wanted to read or that stuck out to you that you want people to?
Yeah, I can. Let me.
And wasn't today the day that you were like releasing something for your book or something, or was that somebody else?
I think that may have been somebody else. I am working on a second book. I'm actually doing a troubled teen industry series, but it's a fictional series about things that can actually happen or have happened in a program. So the first book I'm doing is on conversion therapy, and it's called Perfect Pipe, and it's about two girls who are lesbians and they're in love. And one girl almost drowns in a surfing accident and then winds up in a coma. And her girlfriend is so distraught about almost losing her girlfriend. And her mother finds out that she's more than a best friend and that it's her lover and sends her away to conversion therapy. And so I write about that and what goes on there and how she finds her way back to the love of her life. And then I'm going to do pretty much a series on each faction of the industry because I do touch a lot about it, but all of our stories are so different yet similar that I don't think people understand exactly what the troubled teen industry is. They just think when you think of the TTI, some of these places think, oh, religious boarding schools or behavior modification schools, or oh no, that's just military school, or no, that's juvenile delinquents. No, there's a huge vast of what the troubled teen industry is. So I'm pretty much breaking it down to make it easier for people to understand. I'm going to do another one on like wilderness therapy and just kind of do like a fictional troubled teen industry series. So
So is it fictional but based on the stuff that you've observed like firsthand and stuff like that?
yes, yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
interesting, very interesting.
Or from research from reading. Like I never went to conversion therapy, but at our programs, they would do conversion therapy techniques on the students that they thought were gay. So, or worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. As far as the back of my book, I can go over this. Okay. All right. All right. Dependency is cultivated in the teens in the troubled teen industry, not only in relation to staff, but also to each other via stratified system of rights, privileges, and autonomy. This level system in particular is problematic because detainees tend to continue the cycle of abuse when they are placed in positions of power. The way that these programs were run made it hard for me to thrive. I only knew how to survive. Kidnapping and beating a child into submission does not fix their problems. It only makes the child more aggressive. The staff purposely would pin kids against each other, forcing kids to do whatever it took to keep of in favor of staff in order to prevent them from being beaten. It was a perfect way to keep staff's hands from getting dirty. They could blame the beatings on the kids saying that they were beating the hell out of each other. Monsters training monsters, leaving its survivors to deal with the mess years later after they leave the program. If beating kids into submission worked, you wouldn't need the troubled teen industry. So what is the fucking point of sending them away to be beaten for $3,000 a month when you can just keep them home and beat them for free? What I got from these programs was a lifetime full of trauma. Social anxiety, it turned me into an irritable person, always on guard, defensive, making it hard to trust others. What I needed was therapy, a loving, nurturing home with parents who actually gave a shit. But instead, I was labeled a bad child, and I was treated as such, never experiencing love that made me feel worthy. So, what is the solution to prevent children who were sent away to the T.T.I from being abused? For years, survivors have been advocating for reform in the troubled teen industry. It's been quite a challenge for these groups to go state to state and try to get legislation passed. So far, legislators have passed bills similar to the one below in a few states such as Utah, but kids are still dying. This bill looks great on paper, but it must be enforced. Accountability needs to happen to the staff who are convicted and found guilty of abusing children. If I did half the things that were done to me during my time in the troubled teen industry to my children, I would be rotting away in a prison right now with my kids taken away from me. But somehow these motherfuckers still get away with this shit, and I'm sick and tired of it. The troubled teen industry needs to be regulated, and these homes need to be registered with the state. There needs to be a limit on how many programs can exist in each state. That way the caseloads are not as large. There needs to be some sort of county board that is a third-party entity that goes and checks on the welfare of these children that's not associated or paid by the troubled teen industry program itself. That way there's a hotline for abuse that can be called, and a caseworker can go check on these children and ask if they're okay. There should be absolutely no religious affiliation when it comes to evidence-based troubled teen industry programs. If you're going to have a religious affiliation, then it needs to be accepting of all religions. That way, there's no indoctrination. There should be absolutely no censored letters or phone calls between the guardian and the child. They should be able to communicate freely. By implementing these safety protocols and legislation, it will help prevent children from being abused, neglected, or dying in these programs. The troubled teen industry is one of the largest trafficking and child slavery organizations in America right now, and we must take action. Other advocates started forming groups like Unsilence, We Warned Them, the Troubled Teen Advocacy Group, and I'm happy to know that our survivor community is strong and ready to take on the troubled teen industry. If my story helps one parent from making the mistake of sending their child to an abusive school, it's worth it. If my story helps one survivor gain the courage to speak up about their abuse, it's worth it. If my story helps get a law passed giving children in these facilities their own Bill of Rights, it's worth it. If my story helps one person who is suffering from suicidal thoughts and helps me find the strength to keep moving forward and helps them find the strength to keep moving forward, it's worth it. I am believable, I am loved, I'm worthy, and I'm a damn good fucking mama to my children. I spent the last 3 years deconstructing the religious brainwashing that I was forced to believe in. Faith deconstruction, also known as deconstructing faith, evangelical deconstruction. We cannot ignore the fact that church leaders have been using these structures to cover up for sin and abuse. This cannot be tolerated. There are thousands going through the motions of religion who do not possess the reality of Christ in their souls. For some, it's just family and tradition. Some have deceived themselves, and some have just grown up into it, benefited from it, and are now trapped in it. When certain social norms start to march out of step, the biblical bakery crumbles. You do not deconstruct your presumptions, you abandon them. I am more of a spiritual person rather than a religious one. I do not affiliate myself with any denomination. As for right now, I'm still in the process of relearning God and discovering my spiritual path. Who knows? Maybe I went through what I went through because God knew I was a strong person to take these heifers down that are beating and abusing children in his name. I often think about who I would have been had I not experienced so many traumatic events. I mourn the fact that little Sabrina never got the love that she deserved. She deserves so much. But adult Sabrina, well, she has all the love she needs. And it makes my heart smile knowing that I am loved and cared for. I am proud of the person that I am today, a woman who stands up for what she believes in. I became the woman that I needed to save me when I was a child, and I'm proud to call myself a survivor. I refuse to let my trauma take anything else from me. Those traumatic chapters of my life are over, and I choose peace for myself. I want to live life and not just survive in it anymore. So cheers to a new chronicle for paving the way to happiness and healing in my life. In the great words of the great Reba McEntire, I'm a survivor.
Awesome. That was beautiful. Thank you for that. um, I have a few questions for you.
Okay.
Over all the schools you went through, what do you think the hardest part of being in those schools was, and how did you deal with it?
For me, I think the hardest part of that was just not having any family. Like, it really sucked for me watching that the girls on Christmas morning or birthdays or holidays or families sending them care packages and I'm stuck with nothing. And I just pretty much just took it. And so now it made me like really awkward when it comes around to like my birthday or holidays. I find myself going extra and overboard to make other people's birthdays great. And then I kind of just downplay my own. I think it kind of really hurt my self-esteem. I felt like, why is nobody fighting for me, or why am I stuck in this program till I turned 18? I had no real life skills or anything, wasn't taught how to do much other than to cook, clean, and be a perfect housewife, um, which I do hardly any of those things. My husband does most of the cooking.
Yeah.
Not that I can't cook, I just choose not to. I'm not that traditional housewife. um, I just took it. Everything, I just took it. It was to the point where, like, in some of the programs, I just didn't care what happened to me. Like, if I died, it was what it was, which is sad. I was that depressed. Like, I didn't care whether I lived or died. But for some reason, for some need, I just fought back. I don't know why. Um, I just kept going. Um, for me, what kept me through going, because you have to find something to connect you to the outside world, was music. And even though we weren't allowed to listen to secular music, I found ways. Whether it was if we heard a car drive by and someone was playing music, I would not dance or act like but I would sit there and memorize that song in my head. Or I'd sneak off and listen to a radio and listen to music. Or during my punishments, I would sing lyrics of Tupac's Trapped in my head to keep myself going. And for me, like, the isolation room sucked, but at the same time, I liked being alone. I'm an introvert. I spend most of my time in my bedroom if I'm not working. Um, so I would just kind of like think of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be and what I'm going to do when I leave the program. I would probably think of, really bad things of how I wanted to hurt these suckers, and I don't know. I just did it. I don't, I just did it. um, I don't know. You learn how to play the game to survive. It's a game. And after I knew I could push people's buttons far enough to kick me out, that's just what I did.
Yeah.
Um, so, and it was really just being mouthy. They would say something and I would find it contradicting to the Bible, and then I would quote the scripture back at them or say something in a different way. Or, do you do that to your children? And they were like, well, you're not my child. Yeah. So why do you get to put hands on me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I just ran my mouth a lot. I'm still pretty much that person today. So the proof that those programs do not work. They do not get absolutely any credit to who I am today. So let that be known.
All right. If you could, or that's the last one I usually ask. I want to let you know I was adopted too at birth. So I can definitely relate on that. As far as abuse on campus towards students, obviously the beatings and whatnot, but did you ever notice or hear about or witness any staff being like inappropriate sexually or like just like grooming or
I
anything?
actually write about that in my book. There was a female staff member that got impregnated by a 16-year-old boy in the program and had a baby with him. And I write that. It's you can read that in my book. I write about that in my book. There is definitely some grooming. There were some girls that had ran away that had some allegations, but I can't say whether it happened or it didn't happen. But I'm just gonna believe them because there was so much fucked up shit that went on. It wouldn't, I wouldn't say that didn't happen. We had a staff member named Bill McNamara at the Rebekah home. He would make us do what's called masturbation checks. Or he would stand at the end of our bunk bed and have our fingers out like this so he could sniff them to see if we had been masturbating. He would come into our dormitory and be like, "It smells like pussy in here. Who's been playing with their vagina?" Yeah. So he would tell us that when his wife is out of line, he spanks her and that we should be prepared to be spanked by our husbands when we're out of line. Like, it was just really sick, gross stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He loved calling us whores, sluts. I talk about that all in my book.
Yeah. So tune in and get the book for sure. Drugs on campus. Did you notice or know about any staff bringing drugs onto campus, or did you know about any?
No, but I do know that when my sister was at the Rebekah home, they were eating the shrooms underneath the cow patties.
Okay.
They found ways of getting high, and they would make their own like prison juice. Like, there was girls finding ways to do stuff, but I don't know if there was any staff bringing those things in. I know that some of the boys talk about at Bethel, the drill sergeant was always coked up on cocaine, and they would find stuff. Oh yeah, actually, I do know. We had a teacher at the ranch. I almost forgot about this. We had a teacher at the ranch, and she was not a qualified teacher. She was a recovering crack addict. And when she left the program, they found the paraphernalia in her room that she was still doing crack while she was living in the program. So yes, there was staff bringing in drugs, but I didn't know that she was bringing drugs because she obviously wasn't sharing with us.
Yeah.
But and I was like, I wondered when after we found that out, I was like, no wonder she was always like
Jittery.
yeah, like the way she just played the piano was just like this banging, and now it makes like I put two and two together, like, oh, that makes sense. But yeah, so but as far as like staff bringing in drugs for the kids, I didn't witness any of that, but there was staff bringing in drugs. So at the ranch and at Bethel is the only two places that I know of.
Okay. And what was the craziest thing or most intense thing that you saw or that went or that happened to you within all those programs?
Oh, golly.
And it doesn't have
Well,
to be one. You can
yeah.
come up with a
Yeah.
couple.
Well, okay. So one was the picking of the cotton. That was pretty intense. It was very demoralizing and demeaning. And then I watched a girl come into the program at Bethel, and the staff member, she told him to kiss her ass, and he pulled his pants down and shoved his bare naked butt in her face. Another girl was suicidal, and he told her to run herself into a brick wall, and she did until she passed out. I witnessed another girl get hit in the face with a 2x4. I was dragged and pulled by my hair naked out of a shower, 5 girls on top of me, holding me down so I could receive licks. Um, Being sleep deprived. I wasn't allowed to sleep when I was at the Rebekah home. They made me stay up. So lights out was at 9 p.m. Everyone woke up at 6, so I had to stay awake at the end of my bed with my nose touching the rails from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. And I was allowed to sleep from 5 a.m. 6 a.m. 1 hour a night. Um, so that really messes with me now if I don't get like sleep. I'm like a horrible person.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't allowed to shower for 3 months, even while I was on my menses. So that was very traumatic. I have OCD rituals now with showering. Um, It was so bad that when I was out the program, I would shower 3 times a day. It was that bad. Just because I was so self-conscious of everything, I just felt dirty. There was, we would find broom handles around the boys' barracks that had feces and blood on them. So you can just imagine what that's from.
Yeah.
Walking past the boys' dormitory and watching them having to do a sweat party, which is a sweat party is where they would turn on the hot showers, turn on the heat, make the boys strip naked, and make them exercise for hours and hours. And you would see the boys write help in the windows, like the words help, from the fog. Yeah.
That's
Watching other kids get drowned, being drowned in the program, resuscitated with smelly salt or cold water. Saw a lot of evil, a lot of evil. Thankfully, all those programs I was in are closed. None of those people are working with children as we know it. They all either run a men's home or a women's home now because they've dug their name into the dirt and we're all telling it like it is, but doesn't mean that they can't go and reopen one.
They just need
Yeah.
to you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of my biggest fears is that these men, that ran these programs and operated them and that they're still out there with no consequence. I think the only one, so you can actually find the clips on YouTube of Bethel, the raid. You can also find clips of the Reclamation Ranch raid. The only person I know that received jail time, was William Naughton. That wasn't even for what he did at Bethel. That was after what he did at Bethel at another program that he opened up. And he only got 20 years. And he, was abusing kids way before that. Herman Fountain got scot-free 30 years abusing children and made $88.8 million tax-free money. He had lawyers and politicians in Lucedale paid to just sweep shit off under the rug. He received 1 year in jail for assaulting a cop during the raid. That's it. Not for abusing kids, for assaulting a cop.
Wow. That's fucking crazy.
And for me, and a lot of people in the beginning when I first started serving, sort of like, oh, you're bitter. Yeah, I'm bitter. Yeah, I'm angry. This shit's still going on. There's kids still dying. I'm pissed. I'm mad that these people are still living their best life because sometimes I look them up on social media just to make sure I keep tabs that they're not reopening programs, and they're just living their best life. And I'm like, oh, like, you know what I mean? And I know that it's so long now that I wish I had the power when I was 18 to just call somebody, but who would have believed me?
Yeah.
Half the stuff that comes out my mouth that sounds like something that comes out of some sort of Steven Spielberg movie, but this shit happened. I think people are so desensitized to all this evil in the world that when they hear about it, it's like, oh no, that would never, you know what I mean? And it's like, no, this shit happened. So I think, just trying to spread awareness and letting people know that these things still happen in America today and to really research the place that you're going to send your kid to. And really, honestly, before you even think about sending your kid away, you should try some alternative community-based form of treatment or care for your child because there are other options.
For sure. I definitely agree 100% with that. I wanted to ask you about EMDR. I started EMDR, but see what happened with me is I had a fucking EMDR therapist, and then she saw me for like 2 sessions, so she opened up my trauma, and then she fucking stopped working there. So now, and now I can't find another EMDR therapist.
Oh wow!
So my trauma is like exposed, and I can't find one.
Right. So with my, I hated the EMDR part. I really did not like it. I didn't like having it. I don't know. I guess there's so much, like there's some stuff in my book that I talk about because I had been molested ever since age 4 that had been going on, but I don't get into the dirty details because I don't want to re-trigger someone reading it. No one really needs to know about what was like, it's sick stuff.
Yeah.
And so she would want to talk about it. So I'm like, not pressure me, but she'd be like, if you want to talk about it, I'm like, no, I'm good. No, I'm not bringing that back up. It could stay where it's at. I'm good. There's no There's nothing you could say that's probably going to make me feel any better. It's there. Like, I'm just not going to, these, like, because I had already identified what in my past, my trauma was already still affecting me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, I don't need to dig all that up. And so what she would have me do after, I would bring up something. So for example, she said, okay, what is 14-year-old? When you think of 14-year-old Sabrina, where is she at? And I said, she's standing at the end of her bunk bed. Um, it's lights out and everyone else is asleep. I'm at New Beginnings Girls Academy. And she's like, okay, I want you to walk up to Sabrina, hold her hand and tell her it's going to be okay. And I like lost my shit, just started bawling. You know what I mean? So she did more stuff like that. She's like, now I want you to go put it in your box. And we had a safe place that I would come up with. And mine was the beach. And now that's where I would store all that shit and I'd just leave it there and go on. And then she would make sure I didn't go to work afterwards. I didn't have to do anything with the kids, cook, clean. She's like, I just want you to rest, drink plenty of water, take a nap, listen to music and focus on because then after dealing with all that shit and bringing that up, then you're kind of agitated. It made me really agitated. And I told her that, I said, sometimes I'm taking it to work. I said, I can't just not go to work. After I have EMDR, I don't know if this is going to wear out. Maybe I should just try talk therapy. And she's like, well, then that's me not doing a good enough job helping you store that in the box. So then she changed it to where, you know what I mean? Made sure I had enough time. She's a great therapist. I wish she was taking new patients because I would prefer her to everybody. When I found her through my psychiatrist,
Is it telehealth? Is it telehealth or is it in person?
it's telehealth.
Okay. Okay.
Telehealth. And when I found her, I was looking on this website that gave like several different, therapists and like their background. And I was reading, and she was like adoptive informed, trauma informed, foster care reformed, fosters kids herself. And I was like, okay, I can talk to her about this. So then when I was telling her about the troubled teen industry, she's like, what is that? I don't know what that is. And as I'm telling her, she was online looking that up on Unsilenced website. I would give her homework to do and she would give me, we were like a perfect fit. Like I feel so bad for people when I hear that they, don't have a good experience with their doctor, or the doctor is unbelievable or thinks you're unbelievable about the troubled teen industry, or gaslights you themselves, or they're for these programs. I've had several survivors say there was people who used to work for programs that were like, oh no, you know what I mean? So really finding and researching the person that you're going to allow be your therapist, because you're paying them to help you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You don't have to.
Trauma. They're also the ones dealing with your trauma and helping you
Yeah,
deal with it.
yes,
So.
yes. And so I just researched and I just got lucky, I guess. And she's an amazing woman. I got really busy. I don't do it anymore because I'm just really busy with work and podcasts and my kids. And I feel like I'm in such a better place. But even before therapy, I was already starting to read The Body Keeps Score and learn more about my trauma and read all these kind of books and kind of just really better myself. And I think I just had this mentality of, well, this is the narrative that people have said about me and I'm going to prove you wrong. And I just love proving people wrong and then being ha so I think that's always just been my personality. Anytime someone's tried to push me down, I've just kept getting back up like a little tiny fighter.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, yeah. No, I can relate to that for sure. I've never given up either. So in your opinion, these schools, knowing what we know now, is it your opinion that they all need to be shut down, or is it your opinion that they all need to be fully regulated? And by that I mean like actually regulated, like.
Oh no, I believe that they all should be shut down and something else should be put in their place. What would help? What survivors are suggesting that they needed, that we needed help, because it's such a spectrum of these different reasons why these kids are sent away. That's why I said it needs to be done in a mental health standpoint, as far as like psychology. It needs to be like almost like a rehab facility. You know what I mean? But like for mental. And then you have them separate from people who have the drug issues. I learned so much bad shit in the programs
So
that
did
it
I.
made me want to go try this stuff.
That's what I did after the program.
You know what I mean? So separating, there's a huge, it needs to be dismantled, shut down, rebuilt. And there needs to be a regulation on how many programs can exist in each state. There shouldn't be like Utah, you know this, Utah,
Yeah,
Missouri, Texas, they're like breeding grounds for these
that's exactly, yeah.
places. There should be no religious affiliation. That's why I gave, so many examples. And honestly, I don't care if my name gets put behind this. I don't care if Unsilence gets my book. That's why I mentioned them. And they're like, hey, she's got great ideas. Let's help get this into law. Whatever it takes. I don't care who takes it to get it done. It needs done. You know what I mean? I believe it should be completely dismantled. Wilderness therapy should be banned. There's certain programs that should be banned, and it needs to be redone. That's how I believe. And it should be separate from the juvenile detention facilities, because there were kids that was in the programs with me that should have been in juvie, not in Bethel. Like there was girls stabbing girls and
Yeah.
doing and stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I don't think that being like court ordered should be a thing either. I don't
mhm.
think that you should do either or because
You should have a
one, it tricks them.
referral. You should have a referral by someone who's qualified on why they feel like you need to be, you know what I mean? Like you need to be seen before, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. This is so I'm a developmental. I work with people with developmental disabilities. I'm a direct support professional, and I actually took a few mini classes on the history of behind the facilities that were open. They're called ICFMR, intermediate care facilities for people with developmental disabilities. So, way back in the day when if you were handicapped, they would just put you in a facility and you was there, right? They would lobotomize them chemically, mechanically, restrain them, do all kinds of crazy things. And in the 70s, we started seeing more bills and bills and bills. And now they have like their own Bill of Rights. So what I do is I've worked in adult day services. I've worked in ICFMRs. I've worked in waiver. And what they're doing now is they're trying to get the ones who can be out of these facilities because they've been institutionalized for so long and get them into group homes. And there's only like 3 to 4 roommates. And we just come in and we take care of them. We provide their services. So if they need their meds passed, meals cooked, they need to go to the doctor, they need help with changing, feeding, clothing, all that, we just do it. And we have what's called they have a service and support administrator from a county board. And that's what I want to see done with the troubled teen industry, where we have a county board, because we already know that children's services do not do their job. We already know that. And we don't need to put more work on them because it's just going to keep getting swept under the rug. So I want our own team. We got our service and support administrators from a county board that personally goes and checks on these kids and has a caseload. And there's only a limit on how many of these facilities can be operated in each state or county, however. And you have to have a plan for these children, and these children need to be involved in that plan for their treatment and their care, which would be called an ISP, an individualized service program for them. They're going to find out what their needs are. So for me, if I were to get sent there, which that's not what I needed a whole ass new family, but if I had gotten sent to these programs, back then, and what I'm wanting now, it would be okay. Well, we're going to evaluate what Sabrina needs. Oh, Sabrina came from an abusive home. Well, she doesn't need sent away. She needs therapy and she needs a new family. Let's get her, in foster care or whatever, and get her into some therapy. Another thing that I want to do in the future is I want to open up houses for people exiting the troubled teen industry, because that's one of the things I faced was
Like transitional
homelessness.
housing.
Yes. I want to open up transitional housing for foster care and for people leaving the troubled teen industry that have nowhere to go. We're going to help you with your GED. We're going to help you with your first month's rent, apartment, how to get a job, your interview, help you save up, get a bank account, save up for your first car, those things. I needed all those. And luckily, I had some people in my life who cared about me enough to help me through that. But it was really hard. I learned a lot of things through trial and error, because these places did not give me the tools I needed to succeed. It was all bullshit. It was same shit, different toilet, every program.
Exactly. Same shit, different program.
Yeah.
Um, One more question about when you're in the program. Did they people that were on prescriptions before they went to the program or got there, did they load them up with prescriptions or did they take them away? Do you know?
They took them away. So all my programs were religious based, so everything was out of the Bible. They didn't believe in that type. It was all holistic care. I mean, we could even eat pork in some of the programs I went to, or have coffee.
Yeah.
Like, so black pepper, we couldn't even have black pepper. We had to use paprika,
Wow.
red pepper. Yeah. So they took all the medications away from you. There was no, and there were some girls that had been on like Ritalin and Adderall for a
Yeah.
really long time, and now they're withdrawing, and there was no proper care for withdrawal. Like it's just ridiculous. There was a girl who had scoliosis, and this infuriates me because I'm a mother of a daughter who had scoliosis and needed spinal fusion surgery. And I know how grueling the appointments and stuff are, and they didn't keep up on it. Her scoliosis actually got worse because they never took it to the doctor. There was no medical care in the programs. It was few far in between if you got to see a doctor. I didn't go to the dentist till I was 18 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have complications with your teeth because of that?
I've always had complications because I was a thumb sucker, and so like my back teeth hurt a lot because I have to. That's how I bite down and chew things. But I surprisingly had no cavities. So that was great. um, but there was no medical care. There were girls that were getting UTIs all the time. My sister had issues while she was there. They found polyps on her that were cancerous when she got out of the program. Um, there was a girl that passed out during woodpile, and she was made to carry wood and drop it from point A to point B and pick it back up. And she was out there for hours, and she passed out. And instead of taking her to the hospital right away, they waited till the dorm mother came back from the grocery store, tried to force feed her grapefruit juice to wake her back up because that's what they heard you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
There's no medical training. So what I want to see in these programs is people who are qualified medical professionals, mental health professionals working with children who actually want to be there and make a difference in their life. Because the way that these industries and these programs are set up, it's all a cult. It's all a cult. I can prove it, base it back to Synon. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Like we have it. There's a lady I talked to named Barbara Ann. You can check her out on TikTok. She's done so many years and decades of history and research on the roll-off farms and the programs. It was definitely a cult. We found a magazine that he had on Amazon, and she bought it. And it was his plans to expand the compound and put a shopping mall and a grocery store so nobody ever had to leave.
I'm glad that didn't happen.
Yeah. There's someone still up and running his ministries too, and we just can't figure it out. But they moved it because they won't even let you on the property in Texas no
Yeah.
more. But they're still they're airing his Family Altar radio series still. It's crazy and disgusting how much there was a guy that took over the Rebekah home after Bill McNamara quit, and it got turned into Marvelous Grace Girls Academy. And the girls said that he would pray to the picture of Lester Roloff, Brother Blankenship would. That's how much of a cult it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even has its God, quote unquote.
Yeah, yeah. They put Lester off on such a high pedestal. We even learned about him in our paces. They had pictures of him from him dying in the plane crash with 5 other girls from the program. And you should go back and listen to Barb's story because back then, if you were pregnant and you came into that program, they'd ask your parents whether or not the father was black or white. And if the baby was black, they would put it in a burn barrel, and then they would give the white babies up for adoption um, illegally at a Piggly Wiggly parking lot for $200 to $300. And now these kids that got put up for adoption go find their birth parents, and they're taking ancestry tests and DNA tests, and they're coming out. You find news articles about it online, and these kids are coming out, and it's just crazy on how long that went on. Like so many kids that were put up for illegal adoption. Um, and you think those mothers ever got money from that? No. Lester Roloff profited off of pregnant girls selling their babies illegally to these good Christian homes.
Yep.
And the girls were drugged with, actually, I wrote it in my book. The girls were drugged with tranquilizers, and a lot
Like
of them were.
sodium pentothal or something
Yeah,
like that?
I actually have the name of it. Let me go back, and it's going to take me a little bit to find the chapter. Hang on. I want to say one was Thorazine and something else. It was like a horse tranquilizer.
Mm.
Hang on, let's set my phone up this way so I can look. But yeah, the woman who actually helped me edit my book, there's some typos and stuff in here, but for the most part, she helped me edit my book. She lived on the farm, on the roll-off farms. Her parents worked for the program, so she was born into this and witnessed so much. And her dad was murdering girls and wanted access to the girls and was molesting girls and raping girls. There were some girls that went missing, actually.
There was the same kind of thing that happened at Sea-Doo. There was, I was interviewing a couple people now that have told me that there was a straight serial killer.
Yeah,
Like,
that's what he was. He was a sick.
yeah.
And people don't understand. This is why I said it needs to be qualified medical professionals, because you got these people who are like, oh, I'm a Christian, or oh, I have this, and they or I'm an ex-drug addict, so I can help these kids. And they're really there to just prey on these children and not help them. Let me go back. I forgot to that chapter. So babies. Sign a consent agreement. Okay. The girls were force-fed dog medication with thorazine in it to keep them drugged. Thorazine made them compliant and calm. Recently, some of these birth mothers have started sharing their stories. Their babies were sold in churches across state lines and in parking lots of grocery stores for as little as $250 to $300 per baby. NBC News reported that several survivors were forced to give up their babies, stopped at a parking lot of a Piggly Wiggly supermarket after the baby was born. Dot Barnwell, the wife of Bert, the guy in charge of the home, would wrap the child up in a blanket, make a call on a payphone. About 40 minutes later, a car would pull up. A man stepped out, handed $250 in cash, which the girls were required to count, and Dot would hand over the infant to the man. At the Rebekah Home for Girls and as well as Bethesda, they had burn barrels and burn pits that they were constantly burning. Several girls recall hearing Lester Roloff / staff asking the unwed pregnant girls' parents upon arrival if the child's father was black or white. If the child was of color, then the child would be burned in the burn barrel, and the white babies would be placed up for a legal adoption. I also want to add that the mothers of these babies never received any compensation for these babies. All the money was kept by Lester Roloff. You can literally Google this information, and a bunch of articles where the women were forced to give up their babies have spoken out about the unlawful illegal adoptions. A few of them have even done DNA genetic testing similar to the one that I used to reunite themselves with their stolen babies. Yeah. The whole rabbit hole. Like, it's sick.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised, like, there's not a documentary yet, like there needs to be one, because I mean, not everyone's a book reader, so I would love to be able. I actually talked to a screenwriter, like last year, and she would pitch different shows to like Netflix and Hulu, and we were trying to come up with stuff. But I would love to see, because there's so many different stories that are so similar, like. I feel like a lot of people will be more aware of it if they saw it. Like, I tell people, like, I know some of the shit that I say sounds so crazy, but I wish I could just plug an HDMI cord to my brain to the TV so you could see what I'm talking about. Because I could talk about this all day long, but until you really see it, you don't understand how bad it was, or unless you've lived it. Like for me and you, we've lived similar, so we get it. But for someone who's never lived and they lived in this little bubble shell, it's like, oh my God, it sounds like a Lifetime movie. Worse.
Just get like a VR headset and like have them put it on and be like, okay,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
think it's like, what about doing that instead of sending them away? Just put them in VR.
Right. Right. So, and I just want parents to know how bad this is, because they prey on families, and they they tell you that they're needed and it's a great school, and then you get there and there's no horses, there's no pool, you know what I mean, all this fake bullshit that they put as propaganda. And I'm like, just like, you as a parent, like, for me, like, I don't even like my kid riding his bike that far from our house because there's predators, right? So
Mm.
how could you as a parent just drop your kid off at a place that you've really not researched just because it has a bunch of good, I can write a great article for a boarding school and put it on the internet, but it's still bullshit. I would be questioning, and not enough parents are questioning. They're not asking these questions. They're just feeding into the bullshit. And so I just want to kind of help them understand what the bullshit is so they can recognize it from the pitch,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. All right. I have one more question for you. If you could go back in time and not go through any of those schools, would you do it, and why?
Most definitely would not go to those schools. Because it didn't teach me anything. It just made me a hateful person. It took me years to learn how to love or accept being loved. And it made me to the point where I would just intentionally push others away because I just didn't trust anybody but myself. And that kept me from being loved by a lot of people sooner. And I wish I would have been able to open up and talk to them, and it didn't help me. And so I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. What I went through, it was really horrible. I wouldn't wish anyone else to go through that. So yeah, I would totally take those years back, all of them, every single one of them. New start, please, new family.
Yeah. Just live in your situation, you would just be able to live your entire teenage years.
I've told, like, people get so upset with me when I'm like, yeah, I told my birth mother when I met her, like, hey, why didn't you just do an abortion? She's like, oh, I couldn't do that. I'm like, well, I wish you had. And they're like, Sabrina, well, you wouldn't have had your kids. That's true. But I also wouldn't have lived with 17 years of abuse. And I tried to commit suicide several times. Like, I'm not supposed to be here, but I am. So I would rather have my parents just, like, if you didn't want me, you should just had an abortion. Like, you didn't do me a favor. Because the adoption industry, that's another thing I could go on for hours and talk about. That needs dismantled and reformed. I mean, it's a whole, if you go down that rabbit hole, it's just selling babies for money,
Yeah.
profiting off of children. And the people who are adopting these kids are not adopting them for the right reasons. It's not for the benefit of the child. It's for the benefit of having a child. There's a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother ball game.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
For sure. Well, thank you. Are there any closing thoughts?
Nope. You can get my book on Amazon.com. It comes in hardback. It's also free on Kindle Unlimited. You can also buy it if you don't have the Kindle Unlimited, then you can, and you don't need a Kindle for this. You can just download the app on your phone, tablet, iPad, computer. Um, you can buy it off of Kindle for $12.50 if you don't have the Kindle Unlimited subscription. And it's also free on Wattpad now for everyone who cannot afford a copy of my book. Because I know there's so many people, so many survivors who are like, I want to read your book, but I'm like, okay, well, let's just put it up on Wattpad. So for me, this book isn't even really about profit. It's about getting the information out there. I'm going to be writing several more books about the troubled teen industry. Perfect Pipe should be out by next June.
And what's
So
that
look out for
about?
that. Perfect Pipe. It's about the two surfer girls, and the one gets sent to conversion therapy.
Okay, that's right.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So, yep.
And also, I'm going. If you could message me the link to where to buy your book and all that,
Okay.
I'll put it in my description,
Okay.
and people can easily access it there too.
Okay.
So, with that being said, thank you so much for coming on the show. And as I tell everybody, if you want to do a part 2 in the future, I might just do a part 2 just to check up with you and see how you're doing. To do that. So, if that's something you want to do, then we'll do that. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And with that being said, if you haven't liked the video by now and you've watched till the end, please like the video, share it, comment, say hi, I was here, watch the video, whatnot. I really appreciate it. Thanks again to everybody who supported the podcast. And with that, you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you.